Do 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 do. Hi, my name is Elizabeth Bennett, and this is my Draw My Life. Whoops. Okay, so in order to understand the story, you gotta understand the family. Dad likes to read books. Mom's pretty much obsessed with us getting married. I have 4 sisters. The oldest one is Jane. She's basically perfect. And those are supposed to be angel wings. There's me. There's Mary. And then there's Lydia and Kitty in the back. And they just goof around and laugh at a lot of things. Annoying. Anyways, so word comes to our house that there's a bunch of people moving in next door at this giant mansion. And turns out he's single. So Mom's pretty excited. Mr. Bingley is the guy who moves in, and he's single, rich, and handsome, and he comes with his friend Darcy and his sister Miss Bingley. Turns out things are looking pretty good. He invites everyone over for a ball at his house, well, like the whole neighborhood. Party's going strong, and Mr. Bingley and Jane actually hit it off pretty well, and it looks like they're getting along. Looks like something might be blooming. But wish I could say the same for Mr. Darcy, because I had a little conversation with him, and he is so rude. Ugh, can't even stand him. Can't look at him. He can't look at me. That's okay. We're just accepting it at this point. So Jane and Mr. Bingley actually keep on texting, or whatever they did back in those days, and he invites her over to his house for some Netflix and chill. Just kidding. But yeah, she goes to visit him, and there he is waving from the window. And yeah, so it turns out it was raining on her way over, so she gets sick, and she's kind of stuck at his house for a couple days. So like the great sister I am, I walk over miles to his house in the mud, and to spend some time, make her feel better, So I appear at the Bingley's house, and guess who opens the door? Miss Bingley, who I kind of already thought hated me from the ball, but it turns out my suspicions were correct. And here she is hating on me, and Darcy's looking weird. And she's looking at my dress, and he's looking at me because, hey, I'm a hottie. I don't know about that, but he was paying me an extra special attention. So, maybe, So me and Jane go back to our house. There's my horse again. And we meet this new guy with like 4 halos on his head. And he's this priesty guy named Mr. Collins. And he's actually set to inherit the house after my dad dies, because apparently girls can't handle their own house or whatever. So he stays at our house for a couple weeks, tries to get acquainted with the place and the town, and he actually pops a question to me. How exciting. And so I'm like, LOL, no. Yeah, he's annoying, and we don't even know each other. No. So after that's all over, news is on the street that there's a new army regiment coming into town, and of course Lydia and Kitty are all about that. So I'm like, okay, I can hop on this bandwagon. Actually meet this really hot guy named Mr. Wickham, and he actually knows Darcy himself, and tells me all these stories about how he's just a terrible guy, and I'm like, me too, man, I'm on the same boat. So yeah, so one day without like any notice at all, the whole gang leaves Netherfield for London, and without any warning at all. So Jane's left in the middle of nowhere, which, we do live in the middle of nowhere, without her lover, and he's basically not coming back ever again. So she's pretty heartbroken, I'm pretty mad at them, and right now it looks as if our love life is non-existent. Whoop-de-doo. But at least things are looking up for my best friend Charlotte, who was my friend from like preschool on. She accepts Mr. Collins' marriage offer, and I'm like, could have done better, but to each his own. So they get married, and I actually go visit them in the house that they're staying on the property of Lady Catherine. And so they just kind of like live in a little cottage, and she lives in the mansion, and she actually invites us over to tea one day. So we go over there, we're being judged. Well, Mr. Collins doesn't notice, but I sure do. It's not really hidden at all. And some news comes out that she has a nephew, Mr. Darcy. Turns out what a small world it is. And So that's fun. He actually stops in for a visit. Can't get rid of this guy. But anyways, so we're walking through the forest. I do like a nice walk. That's something I like. But so we're walking through the forest and things aren't going great, but they're not going bad, and he pops a question and I'm like, no. First off, you broke up Jane and Bingley, and second, you like disowned Wickham from his inheritance, all because you didn't like him. And so the next day he sent me this long letter, and he kind of explains everything, and turns out Wickham is actually lying, and Darcy wasn't, and Darcy can't be that bad of a guy. But anyways, I go home, and I actually leave again with my aunt and uncle, and we go on like this sightseeing tour. It's really cool. And one of the stops is Pemberley, which turns out to be Darcy's house. Right? Surprise, surprise. And so we stop in, and Darcy's actually there. I thought rich people were supposed to like go do something, but I guess not. And he invites the family to dine with him, and they all say yes, and I'm like, this is gonna be the most awkward thing ever. Pretty much it was. But the entire time he was nice, and all of his like maids and stuff were like, he's such a great master, and I'm like, okay, maybe he can't be that bad. So Darcy doesn't know what he wants, and I don't know what I want, and we're just gonna leave it at that. So when I get home from his place, turns out that Lydia has run away with Mr. Wickham. How exciting. Okay, so check in next week for the next installment of my Draw My Life, because I'm not even sure what's happening anymore.